dead posh. That I've not heard the music before. That's my first time. Very posh.
Yeah, we managed to get it working last week, so we finally got it there.
Sounds great.
So, yeah. So, how is everyone?
Well, I'm all right. I watched the Eurovision again last night. I don't know if anybody else was with me on that.
Sorry, no,
you're looking
not
plus. The last, right through lockdown, every Saturday night we've been reliving one of the great Eurovisions of yesteryear. Whole programme, all the way through, live view with hundreds of Twitter friends from across the world. I'm afraid you missed it. Last night was the last one. It was the great 2014. If you remember 2014, that was Conchita Wurst's year. Beautiful one to finish on. I'm sorry you missed that, people, because it's gone now. Should have let you know a week ago.
You're going to be playing some tunes from it tonight, Ed?
Well, tonight I don't know if you're aware of this, everybody, but every every Sunday night, me and Graham Andre have a sing-along, which you're warmly welcome to join in. Tonight we're having a theme of songs which include drinks. So we got a few already. We got the Pina Colada song. Have you like Pina Colada? And that one. We got Cigarettes and Whiskey and Wild Wild Women. Living on Milk and Alcohol. Come on, guys. Any more drink? Any songs with drinks in? Anyone? What have you got?
Whiskey in the Jar.
Whiskey in the Jar. That's what.
Thank you very much. Whiskey in the Jar. Come on, keep them coming. Keep them coming.
Well, cigarettes and alcohol. We'll keep.
Usually the drinks I've noticed they're either coffee or alcoholic. It's very few songs that mention tea or, for example, lemonade. You know, I'm thinking I might be able to get to do "I'd like to teach the world to sing" because it was a Coca-Cola advert, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
It's black coffee.
It's a song about milkshakes, isn't it?
Was that Simon? Black Coffee?
Is it Black Coffee by Blur or Black Coffee and Tea?
I think you might be right.
There is.
Yeah.
You see, there's quite a few out there for me and Graham to mess up horribly. You know, we do it just like this. China in your hands. Technically,
China in your hands is about tea, isn't it?
Well, yeah.
As we go.
All right,
so, what about you, Simon? How has Simon Kidwell? How has your week been?
Week's been good. We're preparing for wide opening tomorrow, so we're looking at years 2 to 5 in tomorrow because we've been very fortunate. We got 50% uptake in all of the year groups, so it gives us capacity to look at those other year groups. So we're getting ready for September. So hopefully, what we learn over the next few weeks will put us in good stead for September.
And there's no danger that the rest of those year 6s and the rest of those year 1s are going to want to surge back in once they see the schools.
We've got them now. We've got a deadline. 2 weeks. That's it now. They've had 3 bites of the cherry. They can. That's it now.
They've had their chance.
They had a chance now. So
And Sam, how's it going for you?
Yeah, it's been testing as it has for all of us. We're in all through school, so we've had early years pupils in and year 1s. We don't have year 6 currently. Because we don't go up to year 6 as it currently stands. We get to have those come in next year. And then we have year 10 and 12 in. So we've had the kind of quite a cocktail of pupils. We're going to welcome year 5 in next and kind of take it quite slowly up to the summer. Just, again, to test our systems, to see that what we put in place works for September. Wait for that DFE document, whenever that might come, probably August the 30th. With all the guidance. And then try and action that. We've got an outline plan of what we want to do, which will probably be torn up and thrown in the bin once we see the guidance. But I think you have to have some kind of plan, otherwise you're going to be caught out, aren't you? Really, I guess.
think that's right. Yeah, I think
but
you need to.
It's been as okay as it can be. Okay is the new good.
I was practically dying in the heat. I've got the hottest classroom in the world. I had all my key worker children expiring, trying to take them outside to sit in the shade. But even that didn't help much last week, did it?
No, it was an absolute scorcher. We put them all in an IT room because it's air conditions. But yeah, otherwise you'd be definitely hanging.
It was very unpleasant indeed. Never mind, I don't know what it's like this week, but it's beautiful out of my window right now. Sufficient unto the day's evil thereof.
Yeah.
So sorry, carry on. Have we got
Kirsty says, I'm just going to
there she is.
Hello,
Hi,
Kirsty.
good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
I can hear you beautifully. Yeah.
Okay.
I suppose it's possible that there's people watching this. I don't know if there are. I mean, there may be one or two. if there are, we should probably whip round and just get everybody to introduce themselves and just say a little bit about who they are. I'm Ed Finch, and I am a teacher, a humble teacher, classroom teacher at Larkrise Primary School in Oxford. But if we work round, why don't I ask Sam, why don't you tell us a few sentences about you and your context?
Yeah, so my school is the Dustin School in Northampton. It's an all-through school. So we start from early years, we go all the way up to post-16. We've got about just short of 1,800 pupils on roll, 200-ish staff. I've been there for just over 3 years and took over a school that was misfiring. Shameless plug. Misfiring in a big way, and we've tried to turn it around. Nothing's ever done. There's still masses to do. We've made a load of progress. For some reason, I wrote a book which Ben has held up. It seems to have gone down well on the Twitterverse. So thank you to everybody that has purchased and read that book, and I hope that, if nothing else, it gives some useful pointers about how to do things in a school. But yeah, that in essence is me, and I'm just trying to stay alive and keep smiling at the moment.
Yeah. Are you counting down for our holidays, or are you winding up to the holidays?
I'm in the frame of mind we're probably not going to have much of one, if I'm honest, depending on when the guidance around what happens next comes out. But then we've got all kinds of things over the summer to navigate, like exam results days for GCSE and A-level, and I think that's going to be very interesting, should we say, compared to perhaps previous years where we've potentially we're to blame for what the results may or may not be, even though we're not, through rank ordering. So we've got that to gear up to. I'll hopefully try and get some kind of rest over the summer and maybe watch a rerun of Euro 96.
Oh, now somebody's got terrible sound going on. Do we know who that is? Mark, have you got an idea?
I can't identify it, no, okay. I'm sorry.
It's cleared a little bit. We'll come back, I think, to talking about those results, because as well as looking about exams going forward, what we might expect for next year, there's something to talk about there, about how we're going to manage people and staff experience of what we've got this year still to deal with. Simon, I'll ask you next, and then I'll come to Krystie. Simon, what are you? Who are you? What do you do?
Good morning. I'm Simon Kidwell. I'm a head teacher of a primary school and nursery in Cheshire. Been there for a number of years, third headship, so getting slightly better as each year gets past. I also school improvement advisor for Cheshire, so go into lots of schools, see lots of brilliant practice, and I'm also very active in the NEHT, and I sit on their assessment and accountability team. So it's something, accountability and assessment is something I'm heavily involved in.
You've been on the telly an awful lot these last few weeks as well, haven't you?
I have been asked to go on the telly about COVID, so been asked to do that, and that's part of my union role really, because it's important that we're calm and measured in our response to it, and the media wants to speak to any teacher at the moment. We're suddenly A-listers in terms of wanting to speak to us, but it's important that we give a calm message, because it's challenging, and actually it's what I've learned over the last 13 weeks about agile leadership. I mean, you can't preempt things. We'd love to make some concrete plans for September, but we're nowhere near, and we just got to wait for that guidance, like Sam said, because our plans could be completely changed. So it's important that we use the media and social media not to set the hairs running, because we just got to react to what's happening in a very fleet, agile sort of way.
Yeah, well, I'm personally glad that it's you that's speaking. I can think of people who wouldn't do it so well. So you're doing a grand job there. Krystie, hello. We've never met, I don't think. I'm Ed. Hello, Krystie.
No, we haven't.
We haven't. So where do you work then, and what's your role, and how have you got there?
Okay, so I'm a principal of a large 3-form entry primary in Dewsbury, West Yorkshire. It's my second headship. I actually came into teaching quite late in life. I used to be a supermarket manager, so that's something a little bit different. It might have been a better place to be currently, I don't know. But we've got around 640 pupils. It's been a difficult couple of weeks, actually, compared to the rest of lockdown, because there's been a sudden spike in our area. And some factories have had to close, and we've had quite a few cases in our families. But we are staying positive. And again, like everybody's saying, we're still making plans. We know they're going to have to change. I can't even tell you what number plan we're on by now. I've just had to learn not to be quite as much of a control freak I think.
I know. So, Sam, you and Kirsty, you didn't pop your Twitter handle up. So, if people want to chat to you, connect with you, Kirsty, you're at the tattooed head teacher or something, was it? Am I right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
At tattooed head teacher.
Tattooed head teacher, and Sam is Sam Strickland, isn't he?
It's at Stricko Master.
At Stricko Master. There you go. We should probably let these other boys introduce themselves as well. They're technically up as hosts rather than guests, but they may be equally unknown to the audience, if any. So, what do we say? Say, Mark, hello. Nice to see you again, French.
Good to see you too. I'm a primary school teacher. I teach actually in a large junior school on the south coast. So we've been busy for the last however many weeks as we've been open. We've had over 80% take up. So we've been very busy working with
80%.
Over 80. Yeah.
Has anybody else had anything close to that? We haven't got a fraction of that.
No, there are schools locally up to 90%. The highest I've heard.
Really?
It's 80.
Yeah.
Gosh, I haven't heard of it. I think we're doing pretty well when we've got 7 children in a class. Not enough key workers. Key worker bubbles just keep growing and growing and growing and growing. But the class bubbles are small and staying small so far. Could all change. It's all to play for. It
could change. Yeah, the key worker bubbles tend to grow slightly. They've grown steadily, but that becomes the next challenge about where to put them.
Yeah, exactly. And whether you can cap that. You're saying, well, the sixes have had their chance, and if they don't want to come back, that's it now. But with the key workers, I feel that we have to keep on growing with the demand. Yeah. You'd end up with a school full of key workers in bubbles and no class bubbles at all at this rate.
Yeah.
It's an odd thing. Yeah. Ben, just introduce yourself briefly, sir.
I feel a bit out of place, actually, because I'm a former deputy head teacher in primary. I'm no longer teaching, so I've stepped to it. I engage in, I guess, conversations with head teachers, and I sit. We have a round tables where people sit round, discuss plans, issues, challenges, and find ways forward. Kirsty, it's how I know Kirsty, actually. She's joined us recently, and hopefully she's finding it useful. But we do well-being, problem solve, a whole host of things. And we're looking at plans for next year, which are going to be pretty exciting. So, yeah.
I think that's brilliant work that you're doing, Ben, because I think, a lot of head teachers can find it a very lonely role. And if they don't naturally spark off with a community in their local area, or if they, for whatever reason, don't feel they can speak very openly at MAT meetings, then they're very much on their own, aren't they? So I think creating a third space which is there for debate and for connection is beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah, the idea is it's no politics, no judgment, confidential, safe space. If you've got something that's just going off and you just need a place to go, there we go.
I think it's the power of working together, isn't it, and collaborating. And like you said, I found it really useful because we are very much in times that, we've never experienced before. There isn't a right way to do things. And it can play around in your head quite a lot. So it's been really good for me to share ideas, take ideas. And you actually sit there thinking, actually, we're all in this together, aren't we? Let's face it.
Yeah. I've got a couple of people on comments saying, Sam, you're a little bit quiet. So I don't know if you're able to tweak your microphone settings, or it might just be that you sit a little closer. I don't know. But Graham Andre is trying to hang on every word and he's struggling. So, exams then. The first thing to look at is this year. And, those kids who didn't get to sit those GCSEs and those poor heartbroken year sixes who didn't get to sit their SATs. And I'm being flippant about that, but actually I think it's a really serious sort of rite of passage for the sixes, as it is for the GCSE children and the A-level children. You're looking forward to results day, and how are you managing that? And what are the big risks, do you think? Where should I start with that? Sam, what do you think? You've got those massive things, GCSEs, A-levels. How does that work for you?
Yeah, it's really, we've debated as a senior team endlessly about what do we do. Do we electronically send the results out so the pupils can digest them at home, and that avoids having to deal with the whole issue around social distancing, if that still applies come mid to late August, and that's still an unknown at this point in time. Will we have to have 2 meter, 1 meter, no meter, whatever? with a view then that we would then invite key pupils that we've identified into school for welfare chats, for chats about their next destinations. So invariably you're going to have GCSE pupils who won't have hit the grades to get into the sixth form, as one example. And what we've discussed is, do we look actually what we already know about those kids and just say, look, this is a blip here, it's an anomaly in many regards, let's just let them in anyway and give them a chance, as opposed to being, you know, really rigid and going, well, if you haven't got your 5 or 6 or whatever, you're not in. And I can imagine the rebuff from the parents would be, but they didn't sit an exam. They've gone through this weird system that may or may not be accurate. And the same really with the year 13 pupils. UCAS is going to be a really interesting one. It may well be when we download the results on the day before and we run everything through our systems and check with UCAS track that all our kids are in, and it's not a problem. It could be a complete car crash. And I'm already sort of bracing myself, certainly at a GCSE level, for pupils not getting the top grades that they might have got had they sat the exams. If everything's marked against a curve, which normally it is, and you're only fishing from a pool of, say, 3% of the country get a 9, this isn't meant critically of your kind of powerhouse schools that always get really good results. But let's just make up a school, Hogwarts boys. Every pupil will probably put down for an 8 or a 9 and get that grade, because historically the trend for the centre are those grades. What it doesn't take into account is that Hogwarts boys may well have had 20 kids that had a bump day, went in with a headache or a bereavement in the family and bombed the exam out, and then that pool of 3% that other schools tend to be able to fish into is actually quite reduced compared to normal, I would argue. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that's me just being a real cynic about this summer.
Yeah, but also
it's a real worry.
It is, and there's that school where they haven't traditionally got great results, but they've got a couple of kids who are bloody brilliant and would have nailed it, and who are surely going to be pulled down by the thing. Do you think you'll just see a raft of people wanting to do resits as soon as possible, or do you think people will just roll over and, if they can get their next destination, just chalk it up?
I think it's probably about the next destination, isn't it? I think
so. For
most pupils, and this isn't doing them a disservice, they probably, as long as they get to what they want to next, probably won't really mind so much. Maybe that's a bit of a clumsy phrase. Equally, if you're going into the sixth form, we've allowed you in, but you haven't got a 4 or 5 in maths and English, you probably want to do an exam in those to get those grades to allow you to get on to the next destination after that. So I think it's going to be really variable, obviously, from one pupil to the next and one person to the next, and parental expectations as well. I mean, a worry from my school's perspective is that the historical trend of results is dire. And last summer, and I appreciate the weighting is meant to be higher to last summer, our results are through the roof. That everything that we'd put into place finally kind of came together and the lag effect kicked in, and our results were, out the park. But what impact will that have on this summer? I don't know. I don't know the answer. No.
So, Krystie and Simon, you're in a slightly different situation. You're looking at year 2 sats, looking at year 1 sats, looking at the phonics check, looking at the times tables check. I mean, are you gutted that the kids didn't get to sit that? Do you think the kids are gutted? Do you think it makes an iota of difference? How do you feel about it? Why don't I start with Krystie?
In terms of pupils, it's very different, isn't it? Because I don't think they get the same sense of achievement. As a head teacher in primary, I don't necessarily agree with the testing anyway. So no, I'm not gutted. I'm not upset that they haven't had to sit them. We know where they were. We don't know quite where they are now. No. But when they come back in September, those that haven't come already, we will just continue teaching them, and fill the gaps where we need to. We don't generally take the tests as the be all and end all anyway. No. So I think we're in a different position to secondary schools. What I am concerned about is my year 6 children finishing primary, if you like, and ticking the box to say that they've moved on. And I'm really concerned that not all of them will have the opportunity to say goodbye. So we're trying to set up an event for families where they can come along and say goodbye and get their, the year 6 hoodie and the leavers book, just so they feel like they've finished, because it's like a rite of passage, isn't it? It's the water fight on the last day and all that they're missing out on. So I think for most of my pupils, it's not going to be, oh, I didn't get my SAT. It's more about I didn't get the chance to say goodbye.
Yeah.
I don't know what Simon thinks.
Yeah, Simon, where are you with that?
I certainly haven't had any feedback from the parents or the children that they've missed the SATs, but they've certainly, the year 6 have been most affected by lockdown. And when we closed on in March, they were very, very upset when they thought that was possibly their last day in school. But it is part of school, isn't it? And the SATs are part of that year 6 experience. And we have a wonderful time post SATs in our school, where we go to London, where we do a big, we hide a local theatre, all those wonderful things that we do. And SAT is part of that as well. I mean, we don't, they haven't missed it. However, there have been some children who worked very hard for it, and perhaps would have liked the opportunity to have seen how well they've done. I think the important thing for me, though, is how well what the high schools are going to do, Sam, in terms of grouping and setting, and what because you're going to have no destination grades for this cohort of pupils. So have you got an opportunity to do something quite radical and different, because they won't have a Progress 8 score attached to them?
Yeah, it's interesting to see what comes out from the Department for Education in due course, because if they want to maintain Progress 8, there's going to have to be some way of benchmarking these pupils. I mean, is this an opportunity actually to say, do you know what, Progress 8, bye-bye? And actually, it is our best play just to let these pupils go into secondary school and enjoy their Key Stage 3 experience. If we're talking about true breadth, balance, the curriculum as a progression model, what are we testing them for when they come up, apart from accountability? You know, we could talk about CATS testing, GL assessments, which many schools do. Most of that data doesn't really mean a lot. I think the important bit in this window, as we would do with any kind of transition window ordinarily, is the conversations we have with you as the primary counterparts about what can Johnny, Daisy and Jane do, what can they not, where are they at with their reading and their maths, and then we put in the appropriate support for them when they come up so they can catch their peers up. I would far rather we immerse those pupils when they come up in our culture and our routines and how we work as a school. Go through what would have been the transition process as well. Get the parents in to reassure them about the school, and you know what? Just get on with teaching them. I actually think we get so hung up about tests and data and benchmarking, and most of it's meaningless. Let's just crack on with it, and hopefully someone somewhere will think, actually, on this one occasion, maybe we suspend accountability in 5 years in a Progress 8 sense, and maybe just go with raw attainment for GCSE results. I don't know. But I just think if we start testing these kids and that's their first experience when they come up in September, we're going to ruin, the secondary school experience. And we've already got kids that, as Krystie's rightly said, have not been in school for ages, have not had the chance to finish off year 6, haven't gone through their normal rite of passage. They're going to be upset anyway. Many will feel like islands, because if all they've been is at home with parents, if they're lucky to have parents, and then their first experience of a secondary school is, a menacing head or deputy saying, "You're going to an exam hall now, get on with it, these count." It's not a great start.
No. I mean,
we're in the same position at primary school as well now, because we've got no Key Stage 1 data, so there's no progress data there. So it might be a great opportunity to think about how we measure progress, because we all know that measuring progress is really challenging, and we know that Key Stage 1 to Key Stage 2 is challenging. You're penalised for certain types of pupils. If you've got children with special needs, your progress scores are going to be significantly affected. If you're in a school with white working class people, you're going to be affected. So actually, and it's interesting because some people in the Department of Education, some long-serving people in the Department of Education, would like to go to pure attainment. But if we do go to pure attainment, that's going to scare a lot of schools. And the NHT did a report about 2 years ago on accountability, and they talked about grouping schools into families of schools and then looking at attainment across those families. And I think there's some really creative things. Fisher Family Trust already do it. And look at that just for free school meals. But actually, you can do some really good things about grouping schools into families of 50 and then looking at comparing how well we're doing in those families, moving away from the league table culture, where we're actually measured against Hogwarts boys is measured against Grange Hill comp, isn't it? It would be really helpful if we could go and look at attainment in that way, rather than these spurious ways of measuring progress, which are very, very flawed.
There's an interesting question about actually the statistical significance of an individual cohort anyway. Particularly, I mean, if you've got a large school where you've got lots of kids in a cohort, one child may only be worth 0.5%, 1%. If you've got a small primary where you've got 8 kids in year 6, one child is a huge percentage of your progress for whatever. And if that one child has a bad day, sats and things are gone. So I certainly think there's a call for reevaluating what accountability is and what it should be, what it should look like as well. It brings one to sort of another question a little bit though. If the exams are not happening this year, is my sound gone?
Someone is creating a really lovely electronic sort of feedbacky sort of a noise, and I don't think
Like your music round at Web Brew Ed Sheffield, that is it.
They never let that lie. They never let that lie. You should have been in the Brew Ed yesterday. You had a fantastic music round.
Yeah, I had to do the hedges yesterday.
Yeah. Right, we've got rid of that electric sound. I go again on that, Ben, because it sounded like it was going to be interesting. Have another.
Yeah, I'm not sure where you got up to now. It's like one of those, isn't it? It's like where did we stop?
Yeah.
I was going to say is exams have been wiped out for this year effectively, other than the way that the teachers are now assessing them on the curve. Is there a case for reevaluating exams completely and looking at what you do? So saying, you know what, ignore the baselines, year 2, phonics checks, the times tables checks, the SATs at that level, even looking at GCSEs in secondary, because if kids are carrying on all the way to 18, do GCSEs still have the same impact in terms of exams and measurability? Or is there something else, a better way of doing it? I mean, we have the whole future potentially, an opportunity to look at. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, Sam. If I start with you with the GCSEs potentially.
I guess the key thing is the thinking that goes around this and the time. What we factor as well. What we don't want is something that's completely reactive and no real thought is put into it, because that can have really dangerous unintended consequences. And I think there's a danger of throwing the baby out with the bathwater here if we're really uncareful with what we do. I think there's an opportunity, kind of as I said a few minutes ago, to really think about accountability in its broadest sense. What does Progress 8 really mean? It's something for schools. It doesn't mean a lot to parents. When I stand up in a hall and say, well, our Progress 8 school's this, you get a blank look. If you say our headline attainment in terms of A star to C is this, that does mean a lot to parents. I suppose that's a generational thing in many regards. I don't know, it's a hard one, because the pupils themselves are so ingrained because of the system as a whole that they're working toward this end goal. And are we almost going to unsettle and nerve them by taking GCSE and A-level away? We might be doing them a favour. They might be thinking, hallelujah, thank God. I think it's one that we probably need a big working group to really try and think of a new way of doing things. But I do think in the short term, I think we could look at accountability and how that works and what does that actually say. I mean, you know, it's not a level playing field across the country, and it's not meant as a sob story, but you've got schools that will get £9,000 or £10,000 per pupil at a secondary level versus schools that get maybe £5,000 per pupil at secondary level, and we're comparing them in a league table sense, you know, in terms of Progress 8 in the same way. Well, if I had, for sake of argument, £4,500 per pupil more for all of my students, what I could do in my school would be something amazing because of the money, compared to another school that gets that level of funding. So there's huge regional disparities, and I think we've got to level the playing field up a lot more on one front with funding. I know this isn't about funding today, but it does have a knock-on effect on results without a shadow of a doubt. A-level as well, just thinking about what would we do with that. It's a whole, because historically our A-level system has been the gold standard of the world, and just suddenly ripping it up and saying, oh, that doesn't really work. It might be that we have an interim kind of step at GCSE that allows you to progress to post-16. I do think we also need to think about what other opportunities are there for pupils. If I'm the student that wants to become a golf coach for the rest of my life, getting the EBAC probably, and I'm not doing the EBAC a disservice, probably doesn't really matter. But what do we do for those kids? Because 6, 7, 8 years ago, there were loads of BTECs in bricklaying and car mechanics, which have all disappeared. And actually, there's certain pupils that need those qualifications and succeed and fly at them and open up all kinds of opportunities for them. And I think we probably need to think about that again, actually. Why have we got rid of all of that?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I got asked for my my GCSE and O-level certificates to do a national apprenticeship in school leadership. Like this, no, you have to find your GCSE certificates. I'm like, that is extraordinary. I said, well, I've got a degree from Oxford University, and I can tell you the matriculation requirements required me to be able to read and write, but
Have you got a National Record of Achievement folder?
I couldn't find it, mate. No idea. I don't know if I ever had one of those. Well, I could not believe that, but no, you had to. I found them. It was a miracle, but I found them. But yeah, no, so those at that level with your O levels and your GCSEs and your A levels, there is that argument that that is what universities understand, and a better argument that that's what employers understand.
Yeah.
But Krystie, if we think about our SATs, I mean, I struggle to see a benefit to the child. You unpack it.
Yeah, it's a vicious circle, I think. We've got, for schools like myself, where our attainment isn't necessarily where people would want it to be, but our progress is above average. It's really important that we have some kind of way of showing where children are when they come to us, and baseline is the way we currently do that. Now, I'm not saying I agree completely with baseline testing, but there is some merit in having a benchmark. We've also got to remember we've got a moral duty to make sure our children are literate and are able to enter high school with the appropriate skills. And whether you agree with SATs as a way of demonstrating that or not, certainly whatever we do, we need to be working to that level, don't we? So whether it is a test for the pupils or not, we still need to be aiming towards something. And I guess it's really difficult if you're aiming towards something that isn't measured. So it's, to me, it's like a dilemma, really, because I would love to move away from testing and focus completely on teacher assessment. But then you've got the argument that says, is that completely accurate? And then they will go to high school and have to do tests. So part of me thinks I've also got a moral duty to teach them how to do a test, because that is a skill in itself, isn't it? So I haven't really answered your question, have I? Because I don't think I know the answer.
I don't think it. Well, I'll tell you what. If anybody knows the answer, Simon Kidwell is it. We'll get. I think it's an absolutely vexed question myself. You know, my hippie heart wants to kick it all out, and my pragmatist heart says that maybe you do need something. Simon, where do you stand on it? Where does NHS
firstly, I
stand?
think we're going to waste a lot of energy with the government that got voted in to continue with testing, trying to change it in the next 4 years, because we had the Labour Party who were very much about abolishing testing and moving towards teacher assessment, and that didn't sit well. So the DfE ain't going to stop testing. So what we can do is actually make some adaptations and try and get some gains around the bits of the testing system which doesn't work. So for me, in terms of testing, not against it really. I know that teacher assessment of writing at Key Stage 2 is a workload creation monster, so I would be quite vexed to move towards that for reading. I think the tests for maths are quite accurate, but I think I'd like to go to adaptive testing maybe in maths in the future. I think testing in times tables, don't have a problem with it because it's simple, easy thing to test with quite good reliability. Don't have a problem with phonics. The bit I'm really kind of interested in over the next year is the baseline. Because Krystie, it's dead right. If you've got a school like Krystie's, we should be getting a benchmark of where they come in and what those schools are like. So we did have an opportunity to move Key Stage 1 testing. Key Stage 1 testing will now continue for another year because baseline has now been postponed for 12 months. But do we go and continue with the baseline, because there's a lot of early years practitioners who are really against it. But if you ask primary school leaders, 2/3 are in favour of it. Only if you, 2/3 in favour of it if you abolish Key Stage 1 SATs.
Okay.
Actually, so that's attention. Only if it means less Key Stage 1 SATs, because we think that Key Stage 1 SATs are more damaging than the baseline. However, we won't have that data now till 2018. So I think going back to Sam's point around the different budgets we have, and if we are looking at families of schools, wouldn't it be great to include finance in that as well, Sam? Because we're looking at the things that go and affect schools. We could look at grouping schools according to budget or according to the populations they serve and those sorts of things. So that's something I'd really like to explore. But is testing going to go? No. Do we have an opportunity to reshape accountability? I think we do. and make sure that testing isn't the tail that wags the dog. And I'm hoping that in the next year, in 2021, I'm pretty sure that GCSEs and SATs will continue, but I'm hoping that the league table approach of ranking schools from the top 1% to the lowest school, that we look at that again, because that's incredibly damaging in terms of what happens in it. And it's a zero-sum game, isn't it? So if Krystie's school goes and improves by 10% and my school stays the same, I'm going down that league table.
Yeah.
So we need to address that, because the system can't improve when we have a zero-sum game accountability system.
Is that the main issue that people have really have with a lot of examinations? It's not so much the examination itself, but it's the way that the results are then published and it's public, and you almost have public shaming as well as public celebration, because if you're the one that goes down,
and the Daily
school
Mirror,
that I work at has had both.
in Britain.
Yeah, I've had both within the space of, I can't remember how many years, not very many years. We were celebrated in the local press for having the highest progress in writing across the country. We're like top 2% or something for our progress in writing, and that was written up in the local press. And then we got I can't remember, some shocking score on a very weak cohort one year, and that was in the local press too. And you're like, well, actually, it's pretty much the same kids doing pretty much the same stuff day in, day out. It doesn't reflect us. I mean, and it's just personally upsetting, isn't it, as a teacher or as a school leader? And then you've got to think, you look at the number of people who are applying to come to your nursery, and you go, oh, it's gone through the floor. Why is that? It just doesn't. It's in no way helpful or supportive to anyone. Surely it has to go. Who benefits? Simon will have an opinion. Simon, who benefits from the league table thing?
Well, I don't think anybody does in terms of the schools which are top. Certainly don't get the respect. Sometimes parents choose those schools. It's a bit like in my area. If you have a Range Rover and you go to the school at the top of the league table, but it doesn't mean it's a better school. I mean, doing school improvement for 8 years, some of the most poorly educated children I've found have been in some, occasionally, in an outstanding school, and I've also seen schools that get pretty good results where the teaching is pretty poor. It's rare, but it can actually happen. I've also seen some of the best teaching I've seen in requires improvement schools. Seen some absolutely amazing teaching there, and I think that's a challenge that Sam's got now, in the fact that if they're looking at historical data, what about those schools who are on an upward journey, an upward curve? Because there is a lag in terms of school improvement. So they're certainly going to be penalised, and those coasting schools who've always got good results will go and be benefited by the GCSE system there. And I think, Sam, for in terms of Key Stage 4, the whole notion around comparative outcomes, that 30% of our children are not going to do well. So what do we do with those 30%? How can we change the accountability system so that those 30% are recognised for their achievements? That's a huge thing, that 30% of our young people are destined to fail the current system.
Oh, that goes back to what I sort of mentioned a few minutes ago, really, which is that not every pupil should be funneled through a set pathway at GCSE. We've lost pupils through their not being able to do other qualifications that would benefit them, because their own particular mindset and the way in which they've perhaps been brought up even would lead them down a certain pathway. I think we do at Key Stage 3, we should give every pupil the absolute full level of opportunity and the breadth of our curriculum to try and, because a lot of it is acquired knowledge as well, from what they've acquired through their own, outside of school, social circumstances. But for some pupils, they've made a decision, haven't they? By 14, 15, they know they want to be a car mechanic. I'm kind of making this up, but I'm not. What benefit are we giving them by putting them into, as you rightly say, Simon, a set exams that they're going to fail, when actually that we could put them into something that they would succeed in? And it's even back down to the argument of functional skills, functional maths and functional English. For some pupils, that is the right thing to put them through, and that they will succeed in, as opposed to the full GCSE in maths and English, because they'll simply just fail it. And they know that before they even walk in the hall. So what you see happen is the pen just goes straight down, the head goes down in the exam hall, and you walk in and think, failed. We don't even need to send the paper off. We know you failed because you've written nothing. So I do think we need to think about, I appreciate testing isn't going to go. I think you're absolutely right. Over this next 4 or 5 years, testing is here to stay. but it's how we think about accountability and also what we do for our pupils, I think, are the two things that we can influence.
Looking forward to next year, which is not very many weeks away, isn't it? It isn't. Obviously, for the GCSE kids and for the A-level kids, there's this time out of the classroom, which is a huge hold. Just as much an important thing for our, for our Key Stage 2 SATs as well. We can look at a huge deficit model and say there are kids who have been working brilliantly at home, who've been self-directed and have been doing wonderful stuff and keeping up with stuff. But there's any number of kids in any school, and more in some than others, who've done very little on the curriculum. Let's start with looking at SATs. And maybe Krystie, are you worried about this, about closing a gap? Or do you think that'll happen magically? What's that going to look like for you?
Right. So for my children, certainly, because of our community, the big thing that I'm worried about is oracy. Many of my children will not have experienced spoken English it's going on for 5-6 months when they go back to school. And they won't even have had the conversation within their first language, a lot of them. And we've noticed already the children that have come back, and I know it's a self-selecting group, so it won't be representational of everybody. They've really struggled to talk, and we've had to really focus on letting them find their voice again. They've almost needed cajoling to speak, as if they've forgotten how to have a conversation. And for many families, that will be the case. So that's what I'm concerned about, the oracy and probably the reading. However, on the flip side of that, I'm also mindful of the fact that a lot of them will have learned other skills. They've learned different life skills that will add value to their learning when they come back, that they wouldn't have got if they'd been at school. I've got half my children that will have now discovered a love of the outdoors, which potentially wouldn't have happened. I've also got another half that won't have been outside probably for 5 months. So, I'm thinking, I've got to focus on oracy. I've got to focus on celebrating the life skills that they've learnt. First and foremost, and a lot of outdoor learning. And the SATs, I almost think I need to forget about them. And yes, I know they'll be there. And I'm not saying I'm not going to make sure children reach a level before secondary school, but I've almost got to not think about that, because otherwise, well, I won't, but I know some schools will focus on maths and English and forget the other stuff that is so important now. And that's my worry, I think. We can't look at the SATs and think we've got to catch up. I hate that term anyway, because it puts the blame on the child. But we've almost got to get there in a different way, if that makes sense.
I think I agree entirely with that. I think when people talk about closing the gap, the temptation is to think that means reading, writing, and arithmetic. But for those children, and I know several, I know them, I visit their houses to check they're okay. I know children who haven't left the house since lockdown and who are looking like Gollum, and it breaks my heart. And when they get back to school, there's going to be repairing social skills and repairing oracy and repairing all sorts of things. And I kind of think at the primary age, if you get oracy right, most of the other stuff will flow. And if you get oracy wrong, it will not, whatever you do. So, that's why I think when I say close the gap, let's close the gap. Let's get high quality book talk. Let's get some drama activities, some mantle of the expert stuff. Let's get those children using their brains and using their mouths again, because some of them have been staring at YouTube for 5 months by the time they get back. And that's the gap that I want closed. But the disparity between the middle class children in my community who've been going swimming in the river and been doing all this brilliant stuff online and been sending work into school, and then some of the other kids who have literally no connectivity and very anxious parents, that gulf is huge. And I don't want to express it in terms of maths and English, but I want to express it somehow. I'm not sure how. Simon, what's your feelings
Yeah, I
about
mean,
this?
the experience of children coming back, they want to talk, they want to play, they want to do those things. So it's really important that we don't get the whole catch-up thing, because we almost feel at the moment like the government think that September is going to be a magic date where the virus goes away, and we know that we're going to have bubbles that have to isolate for 2 weeks. It's likely we're going to have local lockdowns in terms of a winter spike. We may not go down to a full 3 months. So it's going to be a disrupted year. So the stuff that Krystie talks about is so important. And of course, we'll prepare children for the next phase of their education, which is the high school. But hopefully, because we won't have the accountability is still as harsh and sharp as it has been the last few years. It's really important that they actually dial it down, because if they dial down the accountability, it goes and takes it gives educators the opportunity to go and work on what really matters, and that is preparing them in terms of English and maths, but equally it's those important social things where children become isolated. We've seen it just when the children come back, they've really missed school, and some are still anxious and not coming back. So it's really important we take our time and realize that September isn't going to be a magic bullet where we suddenly get the virus goes away. It's also interesting as well that we're moving away, where we're looking at progress in primary schools, where we're looking at comparing the new Key Stage 1 assessments to Key Stage 2. So the data has become far less granular. So actually progress measures, I think that important thing that Ofsted say they do is to make sure that data is a starting point for any conversation. I think that really needs reiterating, because data over the coming years is going to be not as valid as it has been before. So hopefully Ofsted can buy into that when they start inspecting, but I don't expect Ofsted to be back inspecting in the autumn term.
You're not?
Guys. No. I think they may be in schools, but I don't think they'll be inspecting under the framework.
Okay.
I know they've been called back about 4 weeks ago. They get called back from doing their work with local authorities. So there's going to be some sort of inspection activity in the autumn term, but it'd be great to think, and I hope Ofsted make that announcement soon, it's not going to be done under the current framework of Section 5.
Maybe they'll just be checking that we have a can-do attitude. Maybe they'll be monitoring that. With the baseline, with the government having kicked it a year down the line, kicked it not quite into the long grass, but to the edge of the path, maybe. I don't know where you guys come from this, but my main worry about it is that the information is not available to school leaders or to the teachers who are, so I run the test. Obviously, I run the test. The information is in my head. I know how well the kid did, but it's not available to me statistically until it's released after the Key Stage 2 sats. Do you think that we would win more people around if baseline data was available to early years teachers and the school management, or do you think that's a red herring? I should ask Krystie maybe, because she's at the sharp end of it, and then I'll come to Simon.
Yeah, I think it goes back to the value you put on testing, doesn't it? And we've always, whether you do a baseline test, a formal baseline test that then gets sent off somewhere, and like you say, nobody ever sees it till the end of Key Stage 2, or whether you have your own methods of collating the data that you need, and that's what we will do. So, there won't be the baseline testing in reception, but do we know where our children are when they enter? Yes. Do we adapt our teaching to address those gaps? Yes. So my teachers do know, and certainly my leaders and governing body know where our children are. I'm not really bothered about anyone else knowing. And in terms of my community, thinking as a parent, do I need to know that most children, when they come to my school, are way below where they should be? Well, I don't know. It's a bit of a balance, isn't it? My job is I want to support the children once they're there. I don't want to berate parents and make them feel worse than perhaps they already do. So do they need to know that information? No, I would say in my case. I know for some schools, it will be completely different. But, so to answer your question, really, we know where our children are. It doesn't really matter how we get that information, and we share it with the people that need to know. And yeah.
So are you, I think baseline as a test is going to reproduce what schools are doing already. The schools are doing it already in a form that works for them and works for their context, And this, so it seems to me, a singular tool to crack quite a complex nut. Both of you guys, both Sam and Simon, you're involved in this too. I mean, Simon, you're saying that 2/3 of school leaders support it because they can say, well, if we accept this, then we can say goodbye to Key Stage 1.
Yeah, under that proviso, they support the baseline as long as Key Stage 1 stats go, and the Key Stage 1 stats were going to go in 2023. So yeah, we're supporting that. And actually, many of us did the sample. I think 10,000 schools did the test last year as a sample. It does take 20 minutes. It's certainly not damaging to children. You could argue that it's not the best use of staff time at the beginning of the year. However, in terms of the baseline, it's a short 20-minute thing, and it doesn't have the workload implications and the accountability implications that Key Stage 1 SATs does, because Krystie's school, where they make brilliant progress at Key Stage 1, it's not accounted for. And the whole idea around black boxing the baseline data was because if the data was published for individual children, we were worried that as a union, that actually then some companies like Target Tracker would then start putting flight paths in for children in primary school, and that's the last thing we want. So that was why we argued as a union for it to be black boxed, because actually the last thing we wanted was the sort of flight path culture we see in some secondary schools taken down to children from when they're in reception all the way through. So
see, there you go. That's your unintended consequences, isn't it? I hadn't seen that, but yeah, I can see the product flying off the shelves there already. Yeah, beautiful, especially with the richness of the data from putting it in my tablet. All the gaps to fill, all that. Oh, you could sell that, couldn't you?
Yeah.
Then maybe we should go into business on that. Sam, I see. It was that for me. That was a little bit light bulb moment there. I don't know if it was for you. Was that something you were on top of, this whole black box thing?
Yeah, I'm very much with Simon here in terms of, as long as it doesn't become some sort of ridiculous flight path scheme or model. Absolutely, we need to black box the baseline. I'd quite like to see the end of Key Stage 1 SATs personally. And I'm probably in that sort of 60 to 70% of people that feel that same way. So I'm very much probably I'm going to echo what Simon's already said without wanting to repeat it again.
I think there was a case when I was a deputy head teacher of looking at baselines. It was really, really important for us for knowing when kids came in. We knew where our kids were anyway, but it was having that actually in black and white. There you go. There's the data. We're not telling porkies. It's there. Do with it as you wish. Was fine. Was one way of doing it, and it was a certain level of satisfaction in seeing that actually, you've got that. We know we're right. Job done. And then you worry about them when they leave school and everything else. There's a certain pleasure in that, I think, and being right that goes along with that.
So we haven't got very, very long left, people. We've got about 5 minutes left to chat. I just wondering, I think it's really simplify the question. What do you think in terms of testing, in terms of assessment? What should our priorities be looking forward, say, to September now? Just a couple of sentences each on that one, and I'll randomise it, and I'll come to Sam first. What's your priority for September, sir?
Priority for September: getting the pupils back in safely, recalibrating the school culture, because it's kind of the longest holiday ever, even though it's not a holiday for our pupils, but it's the longest period of time that they will have been away from school. So you're recalibrating them in our expectations and just allowing the teachers to teach. Let's just get on with the job in terms of teaching our pupils and engaging with our pupils as much as possible, but reassuring the pupils as well that if they want to talk, they've got problems, we're here for them. And that for me is the priority in September. It certainly won't be around baseline testing pupils in year 7 or checking what pupils have missed over the last 6 months with mock exams and mock tests. We know what's going to happen if we sit those tests in September. The kids are going to fail and not be able to regain very much, because they're going to come our way with huge knowledge gaps. And it will take a decent teacher about 2 minutes of questioning at the start of the lesson to go, you don't really know a lot about the water cycle and geography that you should have spent the last 6 months looking at. We need to reteach that. And that's what I'd rather my staff do.
Yeah. Simon, what's your priority for September in these terms, thinking about assessment, thinking about that going forward?
Well, assessment isn't a priority. It is exactly it's that assessment for learning, making sure teachers are looking at assessment for learning, finding out where those gaps are. I think the extra funding might be useful. I'm interested to see how I can use extra funding, which we hope is new funding. We hope that PE funding isn't going to get completely annihilated by it. We've already heard that Year 7 catch-up's going. So if there is new funding, I would look forward to using that creatively and looking forward to using it across with some small group tuition. And in terms of assessment, it's important that we go and put that assessment back in its box, to use a phrase that Alison Peacock used first, because it isn't the be-all and end-all. It's making sure that accountability and assessment, we put it back in its box for a year, because it's going to be an unfair way of judging schools over the next 12 months, as we will have a very different year this year. It's still going to be a year where COVID goes and dominates our priorities. So it's making sure we come back safely, make sure the children and the community feel as safe as they can. And those families are still incredibly hesitant, that we give them some real assurances that it's the right time for them to come back, because there's still going to be 20% of my community who really will be reluctant to return in September.
Yeah, same here. And Krystie, what are you thinking?
It's for me, it's about building confidence of the children, and like I've already talked about, trying to build that oracy. But I want to turn it on its head a little bit, and rather than looking for the gaps, I've said to teachers, I want them to look for what they do know, and let's build on that, because to me, that will build that confidence. It just puts a little bit of a different spin on. I'm not saying we won't address the gaps, but let's start with something they can do and build on that. And as I said before, the SATs, whatever, we will do them. I'm sure we'll be expected to do them, but I'm not focusing on them. They'll come May, June, whenever. But it's about confidence. I want my children back. That's what I really want in September. And then we'll go from there.
Yeah. Lots of people on the sidebar in the comments saying that children are just exhausted when they get back because they're so far out of the routine of school. So I think a lot of September might be just learning how to get through the day again.
Yeah. It has been for teachers. My teachers have been shattered the last few weeks, me included, doing full days and full weeks. It's been really different, hasn't it?
It really has. Yeah, it's a very strange thing that we're doing at the moment. I think it's a very odd thing, particularly with those very mixed groups of the key workers, where you've got a range of age groups and a range of abilities and a range of everything, and you're just trying to find something that will A, get them through the day, B, feel productive, and maybe as a remote C, teach someone something. At least that's how it's me. What was the other thing? Oh, there's been lots of talk about oracy, and there's been a couple of people shouting out in the comments for oracy 21, which was started off as a side project from School 21 in London, but they've got some really interesting stuff. They've got resources so you can think about oracy and assess it, in a more nuanced way. What does it mean? It's not just one skill. So what are the skills? What are we breaking down? How might we assess those? How might we build them? I do think that if there's one resource people might want to look at going into September, it could be the oracy 21 package, because I think it's easy to talk about oracy and quite hard to think about. Anyway, we've got 1 minute left, and I'm giving it to Ben. So, Ben, I want an inspiring round-up sentence that'll bring it all together, please.
Don't put me on the spot. Thank you very much, Ed. I've been sat here quietly listening to you. I've made a few notes, and I think what it comes down to is it's not about exams and assessment. It's about removing that. It's about re-looking at accountability. Teachers test, you do your jobs, you teach, you do it well. It's why you're in the job. It's what happens with that and how then schools are judged, and that's the thing that needs to perhaps change and be looked at in much more detail moving forward.
I think so. Hey, listen, Mark's back. Mark, how have you been?
Hello. I've been fine. It's been a really interesting chat to follow along.
Really
very nice seeing it from this side this week. So it's been really interesting.
Right.
So I'd like to say thank you to Sam, Krystie, and Simon, because that's been a really insightful set of answers that you've provided. So thank you very much for giving up your time to share.
Yeah,
Thanks for
great
having
pleasure. Thank you for being here. Thank you to everybody who's been watching along, and thank you even more to everybody who's been feeding comments into the live comments so that we can reflect on those in our conversation. We value that. We're glad to see you. This will be up on YouTube very soon. So, guys, we'll let you know if you want to tweet it around and share it with anybody. And I believe, Mark, is it true we're stripping the sound off and putting it up as a podcast too?
We are, yes. Yeah, that's a work in progress. So hopefully we will probably be about 3 or 4 days behind the YouTube. But yeah, hopefully that will be out soon as well.
Brilliant. Well, everybody, thank you very much for spending this morning with us. I'm off to have my second breakfast and maybe a walk in the sunshine. So look after yourselves, everybody, and have a great weekend. See you. Bye.
Have a good day.
Bye.
Okay.
Now we wait for Mark to